Almost anyone who works for a living will tell you that sometimes they feel like their job is killing them. Take the job that most American kids have dreamed about for at least part of their childhood: NFL football player. Those guys have a minimum salary of $1 million a year and an average career length of 3.5 years due to injury and not making the grade. But far worse is their life expectancy. In one study, they lived about 7 years shorter than Major League Baseball players from the same era, and as much as 17 years fewer than the average American male. Closer to most people's reality, people that paint houses for a living fall off ladders. The guy I once cared for worked as an appliance delivery man. He had completely torn both rotator cuffs by age 40. Nurses routinely sustain serious back injuries trying to move patients, to say nothing of those who are attacked while doing their jobs, especially in emergency room settings. Last episode, we considered how the Exodus story can teach us about health, illness, and the practice of the healing professions. We learned about the first fruits declaration that's recited at the Passover Seder. It's only 4 sentences long, but one of those is, the Egyptians dealt harshly with us and oppressed us. They imposed heavy labor on us. The word heavy labor, fares, is related to the modern Hebrew word parith, crispy or crunchy. And some days, we feel like we're burnt to a crisp or just plain burned out from our work. Sometimes those burns and the other injuries that come with them are so severe we just can't do it anymore. I'm joined today by my friend Jonathan Clemens, PA in Olympia, Washington, who focuses on occupational health. We'll talk about what injury, recovery, and the place of work in a person's life mean to our patients, and the dangers that the healing professionals face in our work, dangers we often ignore. Stay tuned.
No room for the soul that's in my head. No room for the soul that's in my heart.
When someone's sick, they're not just dealing with annoying symptoms. They're confronting some of life's biggest questions. I'm Dr. Jonathan Winkle, and you're listening to Healing People, Not Patients. Join us as we explore how to make our practice about complete healing, healing of the body and the spirit. Welcome back. I have with me my friend Jonathan Clemens. Jonathan is a PA working in occupational medicine, but with a background in family medicine, sleep medicine, pain medicine, and eating disorders. So he has, as do a lot of folks in his field, moved around a bit to get some breadth of experience. Jonathan's PA degree is from Pacific University, and he also has a Doctor of Medical Sciences from A.T. Still University in Arizona. And we met, I'm going to put in a plug here, at the Conference on Medicine and Religion in 2022, if I remember correctly, at a talk that I was giving, which was the original kernel of what became my book, From Illness to Exodus. So we've spent a good chunk of every one of those conferences since then, hanging out, comparing notes, talking theology and philosophy and work. And I wanted to have Jonathan on tonight to talk about work. Not just his work and my work, but what work does to people. Welcome. And I want to start by asking you a little bit about your practice of occupational medicine. Specifically, what does it take to do that kind of work well? Knowing that you're navigating relationships between patients, insurance companies, not just their health insurers, but often accident insurance, car insurance, et cetera, employers, the government, and still be able to truly care for that person while also not getting into any legal hot water.
Oh, well, thanks, Jonathan. That is definitely a big issue. It's what drives a lot of medical people away from occupational medicine. You're trying to serve multiple masters. I'm supposed to be doing what's best for my patient. Oh, by the way, I need to be making sure they're telling the truth, or if I detect them not telling the truth, I kind of owe it to the system to not let them exploit it if I know one can stop it. My particular niche is really working with long-term injured workers. Washington State's industrial insurance program, labor and industries, has an interesting thing that doesn't exist a whole lot of other places, is they keep claims open until everyone is satisfied about everything or close enough to it. And as such, I have people who have had claims open for more than a decade. I've got a handful of people whose claims have been open more than 20 years, because have ongoing things that still need care that can't be addressed. The claim is closed and nothing further is paid. So by focusing on these folks, it's much less about the rush of get somebody in and release them back to work. A lot of these people aren't going back to work sometimes. And rather than doing a whole lot of employment physicals and things like, my job is more like stewarding these permanently long claims from one specialist to the next. It's a great job for a PA because an MD or DO's background would be wasted. All the extra training you guys get and physiology and the ability to discern undifferentiated diseases, very limited use for that in this role.
In other words, you already know what's wrong, and it's a matter of it being really hard to put right, and it just takes a tremendous amount of time.
We still find things occasionally that somebody's missed. I had one patient, another PA at a pain management practice, identified that he might have a hip labral tear. Got the MRI, got him headed towards that direction. He'd been dealing, I think, for about 3 years with what was written off as back pain. And somebody actually taking interest in these patients and giving them every bit of diagnostic workup is not as common as it should be. A lot of times medical people are writing them off as possibly malingering. It's kind of like emergency medicine. You can never trust a drunk patient. And a lot of times there's going to be something definitely wrong with them. And if you shortcut any, you risk their life and your license.
Yeah. It's interesting. You used the word malingering, which was in the next question that I had written for you. Obviously, I have this interest in biblical text, and in particular in the Exodus story. And there's a line in Exodus chapter 5 where Pharaoh turns to the overseers and taskmasters and he says, "You shall no longer provide the people with straw for making bricks. Let them go and gather straw for themselves, but impose the same quota of bricks that they've been making before now. Don't reduce it, for they are shirkers. That's why they cry, 'Let us go and sacrifice to our God.'" And I think that I was thinking that there's a lot of pharaohs out there that are looking at the patients that we're taking care of with these long-term injuries and saying, not shirkers necessarily, but they're saying things like malingering, secondary gain, non-organic illness. These are labels that you see in the chart, and it immediately biases you against the patient. But I know that's not true. You just gave me a great example of that. So I'm sure you have other stories also of how you think about your patients and how they think about work.
So there are perhaps 5% of patients are actively trying to cheat the system that's statistically borne out. And one of the challenges, a principled and God-fearing clinician, is that it's not my job to spot which ones are actually fit. So that's between them and God. My job is to render care appropriately all of the time. And I take pride in treating people, even people who I believe to be cheating the system, with respect rather than scorn. They may have made decisions that are going to have some very bad consequences, but it's not on me as a healer to conduct punitive medicine, not even administratively punitive medicine. So I'm not going to fill out a form that says, yes, you can do anything and go back to work, if that's not the medical truth. Even if it feel like a way out, I could insert myself in the process and punish them, because that's not what we do at all. But leaving most people aside, the ones who are actually trying to cheat the system, I would say there's another 20% or so of the patients who are downtrodden, who have lost hope, who cannot see themselves as becoming healthy again. And sometimes it's called disability fixation or what. But I think that speaks to what's been stolen from them. These people got hurt on the job. Some of them were doing things right. Some of them were doing things wrong. Some of them were hurt by other people doing things wrong.
Yep.
But common denominator when they're in my office is they can't work. So what do they lose when they can't work? They lose probably, I would say, three things. They lose their income. The income replacement is inadequate. It's about 60% of their wages. I mean, if you know anybody who has 40% of their income as frivolous, disposable income, I'd like to meet them.
Especially people other than professional athletes who are working in jobs where they have a high likelihood of being physically injured.
Exactly. Roofers, orderlies, these sorts of
Long haul truckers, take your
Yep.
pick. Exactly.
None of these people have extra money and they're expected to live on less than 2/3 of what they were taking home. So there's the economic stress and oppression. And then there is the social, whether it's the relationship with their spouse or the relationships they're missing with the buddies at work. The sad reality is it hurts somebody to be hurt because they lose their access to their friend group at work. And for the most part, the adage is borne out that as soon as you're gone, everybody's forgotten you. And the third one, I think, is probably the most important, and that would be the self-actualization part of it, where especially the people I work with who you've alluded to tend to have more physical jobs, they can point to things that they did. They can say, I built that, I re-roofed that. And especially in the construction trades, everybody who works says, I did that, I built that, I earned my paycheck. And there is just something on a visceral level that says, I don't want to not work. It's not right for me to be getting paid. I don't know how many patients have said some variation of that theme. I should not be getting paid to not work. That's not right. I point out, it's your payroll deductions that fund this. All this money is not coming from anybody but you and all the other workers who are getting payroll deductions and earning that money. And it's been going into this great big pot, been paying for other people until now is paying for you.
I mean, I always think of it as like the soldiers who, if one of their comrades falls in battle, they pick them up and carry them because they know that the other one would do the same thing for them if it was there. Like there is this certain like workers kind of looking out for each other in that way, even if they don't realize that's what's going on.
When they get separated for any length of time, there's a period of months or so. It's very hard to get people reintegrated. There's a big move to never take anybody off of work for any reason, for any length of time. Because as soon as you do that, the chances of them never going back to work here just escalate. They explode. Yeah. But at the same time, human bodies need time to recuperate, especially if there's surgery involved. And so one of the interesting things about workers' compensation is the evolution and recognition of the social aspects of going back to work, where we're focused on getting people to do something, because sitting at home and watching Netflix is fun for 2 minutes and tolerable for 2 weeks. And after that, everyone's lacking anything to do. If they could do the honey-do list at home, they should be there.
Right.
And so finding people meaningful things that they can do while they're hurt. One of the things I love that Washington State has done is broken out, get the acronym right. Actually, I'm not going to try the acronym. But rather than just having a retraining plan where you can't do your job, skills enhancement training, I knew it, John. Rather than just being retrained into a different job because you're too hurt to do your original job. When you're off work, you, at the state's expense, can go through GED classes. You can get some basic computer training. You can take English as a second language. And these sorts of things are empowering. It's like, I try and teach my injured workers. It's like, you're not broken. You're on the injured reserve.
Right.
Like a professional athlete. You have to visualize yourself going back to work, lest your despair becomes self-fulfilling.
My population is more in the immigrant refugee world, but certainly see a lot of people who are injured workers as well. Many of them who came to this country and started working immediately without having time to go take ESL classes, and have been working very hard in furniture factories and all sorts of things like that. And then an injury happens, a despair that sets in. And now that I hear you describing what was the name of the syndrome, you used a clinical term that I had not heard before, but it's exactly what I'm
Disability fixation.
disability fixation, the overwhelming feeling that I can't do anything, right? Not just can't work at my old job, but can't take care of myself because all of their identity was tied up in whatever it was that they were doing, often supporting the family, often supporting extended family, in fact, not just their nuclear family. So they're really a pillar of everything that had been knocked down.
There's all sorts of stories like that. My population is 10 to 20% immigrant. So I'm reminded of the story of one woman who was working as an orderly, essentially a patient care technician, mental hospital, was assaulted and was unable to return to work. And this was devastating for her because for the last 8 years, she had been legally working in America to try and bring her family over from her whole country in Africa. And so what she lost wasn't just her income for right then, but the nest egg she'd been saving up to bring over her. She left one of her children at about 1 year of age. And so he was now 8 or 9 and had not seen him in person, hugged her son, just seen him on FaceTime, computer stuff for that long. And the amount of dedication and professionalism you see from these people, even in their injury, is just heartbreaking. I had another gentleman, also an African, also a patient care technician, also assaulted. A lot of business from this place.
We're going to talk about that a little bit later. So
You want to move on to the next question now?
no. I want to hear the rest of the story, but I'm just saying it out loud so we both remember that we want to come back to this.
Sure. And his thing was he wanted to be a professional pilot. So what he would do is he would work his shifts. I think he had roommates. He was living rather frugally, and everything he made went to ground school and instrument ratings and flight time and things like. And then he got a concussion, and he couldn't pass tests. He just felt stupid, and this lasted for a period of months, and it was very, very disheartening to him. It eventually cleared up for him, but there was a lot of emotional support we needed to give him to make sure that didn't take hold and become his self-conception rather than just his circumstance.
Yeah. I can really identify that running through a lot of the people that I take care of. For me, it especially seems to happen with folks who are around our age. People aren't watching on video, so they might think that we're, young folks just out of school, but we both know that's not true. Who are so later in their working life and from cultures where people do tend to age at a younger age because they're coming from societies where there wasn't a lot of medical care early in life and things were a lot harder and a lot more dangerous. And so if somebody gets injured on the job at 55 or 57 or 58, that's probably the end for them. And they quickly move into this situation of being a dependent young elder of their 30-something children who are now suddenly in the sandwich generation. And it is that loss of identity, that loss of worth that you talk about is very real. And there's a depression and sort of cognitive decline that rapidly follows the injury in those cases.
Economically, those folks can suffer some of the worst because a lot of pension plans are based on your highest last years of income. And the last couple of years before retirement can make a big deal on your economic positioning for the rest of life. Some of these folks don't necessarily have kids who made it good. We live in a society where there's a lot of nuclear family disintegration, alienation. We don't have the extended family infrastructure to care for folks. And so these become compounding tragedies without that sort of. I actually have a number of patients who are over 70 who kept working. One gentleman was a contractor for the military. He runs the full-size simulated machine guns. So they're doing squad automated or squad level machine guns or whatever. And his job is to keep the pneumatic fake guns, they're full weight and full size, but they don't actually fire real bullets. And so this was his patriotism. He wants the soldiers at Fort Lewis training with these things so they won't get killed if they're deployed somewhere. He was going to retire any year now, working well past 65. And because he felt a calling to a job and just a connection and a pride and a benefit that he was doing something that made a difference. And so when he tripped and fell really hard on concrete, that was a career-ending injury when it might not have been for us, and certainly would not have been for a 25-year-old, because as people age, we just don't bounce back as well.
Yep, for sure. So that brings me to my next question, which is not the one that I alluded to a second ago, but we'll get there. Which the truth is that a lot of the people that you see wouldn't need your help if it weren't for the work they do, and the same work that you're trying to help them get back to, which is dangerous work where people are likely to get injured. And I'm curious what lessons you've learned from your patients about what it's like to do work where you're sort of really constantly having to watch yourself against that possibility of real harm, real injury.
One of the sadder conversations I have is with nurses, RNs, LPNs, guys who have suffered back or shoulder injuries, and they're non-trivial, obviously. Otherwise, they would come see me. And I'd say, when we get done with this surgery and rehab, are you going to be able to let the falling patient hit the floor? What? I could never do that. Well, realize if you grab a falling patient, and especially with poor body mechanics, if you make that split-second decision to cushion their fall, you may be hurting yourself again in a way that you're never coming back from. And so that's definitely a loss when it's like, when you confront the patient with the ugly reality that things can't ever quite go back to normal. Even if they get through the situation now, they typically can't go back to floor nursing. And there are many paths in nursing, but the people who are ER nurses are generally not the people who want to be case managers. And so they may technically be able to work within their field, but it's not what they were good at, not what they wanted to do. Right. There's often a loss. Other times I tell people, well, can you be an instructor? Can you be a manager? Can you be a supervisor? Is there some way we can take the burden off of your body, use the knowledge, skills, and use your brain? Even though this is blue collar work for the most part, there are things, there is stuff you've absorbed that you could teach the young kids, the ones who have the strong backs and lack the experience that you do.
Yep.
But unfortunately, it's not as easy as all that to just try and get somebody to pivot them into a little bit less involved job that still do in their chosen career field. I had one gentleman was a lumber grader for a mill, and his mill closed while he was out. That's not something you can go to another mill and do. That's something that you have to work your way up from the bottom to get to. And he's like, I can't possibly do that. Even if there was another lumber mill that was hiring anything, that job is something that you have to be trusted by your management. It's something you walk from place to place and say, see, I've got all these advanced certifications. You and I can get credentialed in a different medical system, and there's a standardized set of things they look at in our past experience and say, oh yeah, you can do all these things because we know he's done them before.
In fact, I know for a fact that if I wanted to move to Olympia, there's a good chance I could become chief medical officer of a clinic there. I just don't, I don't want to move across the country as much as I'd like to be able to hang out with you and, shoot the breeze every week. But so yeah, you're absolutely right. Some jobs are portable and some just really aren't.
So either the tasks of the job are too dangerous to return to. The milieu, the situation, the management, trust, organizational position are just something you can't recover. And so that's very disheartening to a lot of people, because I got a little bit of a perspective on that switching into medicine at age 40. I had a reasonably successful career in IT security management. By the time I quit, I was writing policy for a Fortune 100 company. I was speaking at national conferences occasionally. And then all of a sudden, I'm the low man on the totem pole, the one who doesn't know what he's doing, who has the imposter syndrome. I'm doing an entirely different job. None of the 20 years or so I spent in IT really helps do anything more than tame the EMR. When we ask patients, it's like, oh, well, you've got 30 years of logging experience. Back is pretty much broken. So we can put you in an associate's program and get you a general business associate's degree, and you can go work as an office clerk. That's a loss. Even if
Right.
there is some meaning to that, the people I work with tend to have a sense that I was right where I wanted to be or where God put me if they're religious. It's like you kind of flail around for a little bit at the beginning of your career. And then by the time you're 40, it's found your calling, what you're good at. And so you just stop switching and you just get real good at doing what you're doing. And then something happens and that's interrupted.
Yeah. It's true. You know, when you talked about some of the folks in nursing and pivoting to a role in leadership or education, one of my favorite stories, and I'm telling a story that I've heard told publicly in front of a large audience twice by this person. So I know he's okay with it being out there. My old med school dean, Steve Cantor, he's a neurosurgeon by training and fairly early in his career developed arthritis in his hands. And arthritis in a neurosurgeon is you can't operate in something that's that delicate. And he goes to his chair and says, listen, I have a problem, and explains to him what's going on. He's like, wow, Steve, that's terrible. What are you going to do? What do you want to do with the rest of your life? He's like, well, I think I'd like your job. And very quickly worked his way into leadership positions in medical education, which is how he ended up at the time that I was training as one of the deans of the School of Medicine at Pitt, and then at Kansas University Medical School, or at whichever branch of the Kansas Medical School is in Kansas City, and then eventually at one of the schools in the DC area. So he's done quite well for himself, but it was that I can't do the thing anymore, but I can teach other people how to do it. And not just the hands part, but also the brain part.
That is so heartening when it happens,
Mhm.
but it's not super common. I have one patient who was an electrician. His job at the time was dealing with UPS batteries, and those being heavy, he just did something wrong one time, tweaked his back, and eventually did surgery. But what he did was train to be an electrical administrator. So instead of actually doing the stuff, he's doing the permitting, the paperwork. He has, and the state requires electrical administrators on jobs. They're the ones who are making sure things are done well.
Mhm.
And so he identified what he could pivot to, and he crushed the testing for that. He 9 out of 10 when passing was 7, I think. Regardless, it was an impressive feat because these are not trivial questions. And these are scenario based. And he was justifiably proud of himself. Now he's still dealing with pain and we're working at that, but at least we've solved the work problem. He can sit and stand, he
Right.
can work from home. He is contributing more and he is getting paid. At least what he was getting paid before, because that's a step up from just an electrician to an electrical administrator.
Right.
But those sorts of things, they don't always exist.
Yeah.
One gentleman who's trying to go from being a plumber to a union plumbing instructor. And there was one position, and I don't know how many different guys applying for it. And the sad reality is, I bet you a lot of them had either were off work or had an injury or were feeling that their bodies were breaking down with age. And sometimes we have a paucity. We don't have enough positions like that for the people
Sure.
who benefit.
Yeah. It's the problem with everything being sort of pyramided is that there's, by nature of the shape of a pyramid, there's a lot fewer spots on top than there are.
In medicine, like your example, oftentimes the administration is seen as a punishment.
Right.
All right, hood really short straw, you have to be department chair.
Right.
Rather than a sort of prestige. You mean I have to do this instead of real work? Because when you're taking care of patients, taking care of schedules and HR complaints and things like that is anything but endearing.
Right.
Mm.
Being that I'm doing a lot of both of those things right now, I can, yeah, I'll just say yes and move on. So now back to the story you told me about those two patients of yours who had been assaulted at work. There's been, I would say, belated attention the last few years to clinician burnout specifically. And there's all kinds of hazards that are contributing to it, right? There's the violence that you talked about, not just in the ER, which is what I was going to bring up because everybody who's listening to this has been watching The Pit. So they've seen it on screen. But resident work hours both before and after the Bell Commission, unreasonable demands and volume in primary care, which is my world. And then the increasing dominance of electronic health records, which basically push the relationships to the side and the record becomes your relationship. And yet, a lot of us, I think, maybe willfully fail to realize that we're as much risk for a workplace injury, even if we're talking about moral injury or cognitive injury instead of physical injury, as the people we're treating. So, you started a little bit about your work with medical professionals and some of the effects that's had on them, but also just thinking about yourself, your colleagues, people that we've met in the community. What do you think about the effect of our work on us and maybe tapping into the well of your faith, which I know is a deep one? What do you think we might be able to do about it?
I couldn't do what I do, any of it. My Christian faith is why I left a very lucrative career in IT security. In retrospect, when you get great, you get gotten rid of. So inclination led me out of a danger zone that I wasn't really aware of at the time of being declared, we don't need you anymore, you're too old to have an opinion. And into caring for people, the idea that there are people walking around, I don't get a whole lot of saves. The trauma surgeons will have people come back and thank them years later for saving their lives. It's not going to happen. But I have people who thank me for getting them back to work. The ones who wanted to, we're going to do it. The ones who can't get back to work, we legitimately get them pension. Either way, I view taking care of other people as my sacred duty to God. We're all made in his image. And even if somebody has nothing in common with me, I'm responsible to him to take care. And so that means no matter how annoyed I might get, I can't take it out on the patient. I just say, you know what? This is my lot in life. And this is the negative things are the trade-off for the awesome privilege of being a healer and working with people. I think it also helps navigate the ethics. I'm responsible for helping the patients at the same time, not trying to cheat the system or help them cheat the system, get them stuff that they're not entitled to. It's a broken system. Change the fact that sometimes it's unfair and capricious. But what I can do is be human, sit with people, listen to them. I wrote a book about that.
I'd like to meet him someday.
Yeah. When I do a new patient intake, again, these are people who've been off work for a while. I allocate an hour just to understand their history and what they've been through. I let them tell me the story, and then I'll go back and read the chart because I don't want to be biased by what their last clinician thought they were cheating or what. I want them be able to give me their story and then honor it. So that's kind of how I see faith interacting. It's obviously we're not proselytizing in the office, but we'll absolutely pray with people who bring up their faith as something that's getting them through. I have seen secular patients find God in their injury, have nothing else they can do. And so what they do is reopen a search for the divine. Normally that's something you see in young people, but old guys like me injured on the job can sometimes, I need to take stock of my life, assess my relationship to eternal and transcendent. And multiple stories of people getting reconnected with their faith or finding one that they find fits them better. For the Joint Commission, we're supposed to actually take a religious history of our patients.
Yeah.
Most people don't. And we kind of do, as much as it matters. but that's often very subtle. Like, who is your support system now that you're not working? You have a community group, a faith community, an extended family, and definitely encourage people to get back to whomever their faith community is. That's where it really should start with people who kind of knew them, hoping that they are more positive than the public in general. Injured workers often are treated with scorn. See what's wrong with you. You can stand up okay. I don't see why you're leaning on the shopping cart to push it through. And why are you here in the middle of the day? Don't you have a job? So hopefully the communities of faith are going to be more better neighbors,
Yeah,
the injured workers as a whole, but doesn't always happen that way.
for sure it doesn't. I'm interested in thinking about many of the professions that you talk about have come a very long way, professions and trades that you're talking about, it becoming safer, right? That guy who moved up the ladder in the electrical industry, right? Those folks exist so that the workers that are doing the frontline work aren't getting electrocuted on the job. And also that the people whose houses they're working on aren't burning their houses down. And we don't let pilots fly longer than a certain number of hours per day. And we don't let truckers drive longer than a certain number of hours a day. There's all these, even the athletes that we talked about, right? I mean, all the changes to the rules and the helmets and everything in football. And yet I think that a lot of us, you and I and our colleagues, feel like we are just being told, well, this is the way the system is. Even if the injuries, if the wounds aren't physical, you're just going to have to deal with it. It's certainly the way in primary care. It sounds like for you, your faith and your belief that what you're doing really matters has protected you in a lot of ways against feeling harmed by that. But
There are occasional times when the system seems unjust. Well, I think somebody should pensioned and instead they're told, no, you're as good as you can get. You're given a trivial amount of permanent partial disability payout, set off. And that happens. I'd say that actually happens about as often as the people who've been lying to my face. So those are the ends of the spectrum where this is injustice because somebody is, oh, I can't, my back.
yeah,
It turns out, watch hours of surveillance video at 5 times speed, watching them use a postal layer for an hour or two at a time. Yeah. As opposed to, I've said my piece. I've explained why I think these people are legitimately hurtful workplace condition and the system just does not agree with me. And I can't change that outcome.
yeah,
And so there is certain amount of moral injury in that. Certainly a lot of frustration, but I still have agency. I have tried to connect people to the extent one can within the confines of barriers, professional barriers, to get people connected to community resources that might be able to help them when the state-based workers' comp insurance system, which I can help with them, is denied to them, at least temporarily. That's probably the biggest part of moral injury I have in my job is watching people's claims get
Right.
denied when they absolutely are legit.
And it sounds like you are blessed to have the time that a lot of us lack in our interactions. There's a little bit more room for you to have these conversations and to find out what you need to know.
So the good news is that these are relatively well compensated visits. I mean, much, much, much better than Medicaid. And as such, the system also allows billing based on time.
Mhm.
So if I need to sit and talk to a patient and the state pays us for that according to 2021 rules, I think.
Mhm.
And so I don't have to be spending the entire visit trying to check off things in MR. I'm just watching the clock as we talk about what's going on in their lives, what the specialist said, how PT is going, what they want to do next, their dream for a retraining job if they have to have one. All these sorts of things. It used to be counseling could count for half of your time. And now it can pretty much be the entire visit. I mean, there's some paperwork to do, and there's this and that, but I do a lot of patient education as well as maybe not quite unconditional positive regard, but really trying to support the injured workers where they are. Because if you don't believe in them, who will? So
Yeah. I love hearing that. One of my favorite stories to tell is every good Hasidic story attributed to multiple different Hasidic rabbis. The one that I heard it told about was Rab Zusha of Hennepal, who said, I would rather give money on the street to 100 charlatans so that I would not accidentally leave one truly deserving beggar penniless than not give money to 100 deserving beggars so that I avoid being taken for a ride by one charlatan. So those 5%, the system is built around not allowing fraud. Like, the reason it's so difficult, we know this to be true with any kind of government benefits and certainly private insurance benefits as well, that the documentation is so onerous to discourage people from taking that amount of time to try and score a few easy bucks. But it ends up hurting the exact people you were talking about, who, no matter what you do and no matter how much you believe in them, can't seem to get over the hump.
The ones that are the most difficult to catch are the ones who have no motivation, are perfectly happy to stay at home and do nothing. Now, I don't understand that at all, but
Right.
that is, the ones that get caught are the ones who say, "Oh, ow, ow, I'm hurt," and go out and work somewhere else. They will be caught on camera by employment security somehow, somewhere. Um, Part of working in the system is accepting that I can't guarantee all my patients are going to be needy, truly needy. But in order for me to do my job right, I have to treat them all, even knowing that 1 in 20 is going to be a fraudulent. I have to treat them all with respect. And I can't see what their job site looks like. I wasn't there. If there was surveillance footage of the actual incident, great. Otherwise, I kind of have to take their word for things.
Mhm.
And so I know that I had fooled for quite some time by people who were eventually caught. And that makes me sad, but I'm still doing the right thing for the vast majority of people who are playing it straight. Do need that.
And I think that that's a really great approach to the whole effort, whether it's your particular type of medicine or what I do. I hear similar things from people that work in addiction treatment and various other things. You have to assume that most of the people you're helping really need your help, and treat everybody as though they're in that category.
Yeah. And I think that in medicine in general, if you're trying to be a gatekeeper, that's just a miserable place to be.
Yeah.
To I mean, because if you're a gatekeeper, then either you're not caring about getting it
Mhm.
wrong, or you care about getting it wrong and you can't sleep at night worrying about something up and denying somebody who
Yep.
really.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And, we get not just gatekeepers for the insurance system or the workers' comp system, but gatekeepers to decide who gets the MRI or who gets to see the very, very busy and hard to get into specialist, and who gets the particular expensive medication. And that's a really exhausting part of certainly my job as a primary care physician,
Absolutely.
because a lot of the job has become that. And I didn't sign up to be a cop. I signed up to be a doctor. Speaking of big conversations like this, you mind if we put in a plug together?
Not at all.
Conference. As I mentioned, Jonathan and I know each other from the Conference on Medicine and Religion. Because I didn't raise my hand fast enough to say no, I am now the chair of the executive committee of the Conference on Medicine and Religion, which has been meeting for more than 15 years at this point, coming up on 20, I believe. And we are meeting this year, March 22nd through the 24th in Houston, Texas. And if you are so inclined, you can find us online at medicineandreligion.com. And if you go to the homepage, it will give you the dates, the conference, the location at the Hilton Houston Post Oak in Houston, Texas, the times. You can see the schedule for the conference, and registration is now open. It is still early enough until February 22nd to register for the conference with the early bird. This episode should air on the 17th, so you are still getting in time if you're interested. The people that present at this conference are brilliant, thoughtful, caring physicians, chaplains, nurses, students, people from across the healthcare spectrum, really looking for, not standing back from 1,000 feet away and looking at medicine and religion as phenomena, but people who are practicing one or the other, or both, trying to figure out how they support one another and interface with one. And it's a really inspiring time to share thoughts and with people who may not share your particular version of faith, but as my friend Pastor Richard Freeman likes to say, we come from the same tree and just have different bark. Jonathan, it's been a pleasure, this conversation. Anything else you want to add before we call it a night?
The one proverb I was going to work in, we didn't actually end up talking about his story, so I would just throw it in there. Some of
Right.
these people are the people who got hurt, do stuff that's phenomenal. And so not only are they out of work, but they're out of master work. So
Mhm.
I actually have one patient who did some wiring work for Bill Gates. And so that called to mind Proverbs 22:20. You see a man skillful in his work, he will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men. So
Mm.
there's a good bit to be said for the spectrum of people. There are certainly people who come from very humble jobs that anyone can do, but even the most skilled person out there is not immune to getting hurt at work. And so I love it because it's an experience that's common to man. Young, old, I've had 20-year-old women who had congenital issues that came up when they were chasing a shoplifter as a security guard to the greater than 70-year-old men I talked about before. So I don't get to see kids, but it still really draws on the family medicine background in terms of people throughout that, even though they're 50 to 70-year-old men is the major part of my clientele.
Okay. You've left me inspired. I really appreciate that. Thanks so much for coming on this evening.
Well, if you let me put in a plug, I would say
Great.
that
Go for it.
anybody who is considering working in occupational medicine, you need to have a little bit of tolerance for paperwork. The good news is once you learn it, it's usually very repetitive. So once you've mastered a form, it's not like you have to learn something new every visit. There are people out there who are at the mercy of people who could not do anything other than occupational medicine. In the grand scheme of prestige, family medicine is probably right in the middle, with pediatrics a little lower, women's health about the same. And then above that, you've got all the various specialties. All the ologies are up to cardiothoracic surgery and neurosurgery at the top, pinnacle of respect and compensation. And where's Ahmed? Compensation's not bad, but the respect's pretty low. The question is, oh, you're doing Ahmed? Well, what did you want to do? Because there are jobs. And for principled people who are willing to, and this is one thing I'm glad you to bring up, is rather than just treat, transfer, or discharge, I've got a fourth one, which is sit with the patient while the administrative stuff resolves itself. And just see them month after month, not making a whole lot of progress, trying to keep their hope alive in the process. There is so much beauty here in fixing people from these workplace injuries. It's nothing I would have ever picked for myself, but finding it, I say, don't get why people hate it. Obviously, being lied to is not fun, but hey, if you're in emergency medicine, you're going to lie to anyway. We just have a lot lower key saving lives. And so if you're a student, if you're a PA looking for an elective rotation, come work with me. It's a part of medicine that I think is very human centered. And there's absolutely science and journal articles and whatnot behind it, but it is down in the trenches with where we need to be seeing and listening to, and just conversing with people on a very human level to help them thrive when all of the other support systems have gotten kind of knocked out from underneath them.
You are speaking my language. Thank you so much. That was a great plug. I hope to have many more conversations like this very soon. And I can't thank you enough for being on this evening.
Thank you very much.
One thing a lot of dangerous work has in common is the temptation that draws us into it in the first place, like those $1 million salaries for playing football. In medicine, that could be the financial reward, or the hero complex that many of us have about being able to save or rescue people. Other jobs promise adventure, great benefits, easy hours, or work from home. Once we're in, things look really different. Remember that word, farech, hard labor, that I mentioned in the cold open? Rabbi Yochanan Trevis taught many years ago that this word is a combination of two shorter words, feirach, soft mouth. The work didn't start out as enslavement, In fact, Travis's story goes that Pharaoh actually went out into the fields and foundries and worked alongside the Israelites at first. He was like an ancient Egyptian episode of Undercover Boss, speaking with a soft mouth full of encouragement. Look, you're pitching into a very important national effort for the good of Egypt. I'm right beside you. But the work got harder, the words got harsher, and all of a sudden Pharaoh was back in the palace. The Israelites were still hard at work. Another commentator used some fancy numerology tricks to suggest that the word farich hints that the Egyptians imposed every type of work that the Jews now abstain from on Shabbat. They were making the point that only free people get a day of rest. There would be no rest for the enslaved Israelites. I thought of this when I attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony for Duquesne University's new medical school in 2024. The university president, Ken Gormley, told the story of the founding of the school by the Spiritan Order of Priests. Close to 200 years ago, those priests dug clay from a bluff overlooking the Monongahela River and baked it into bricks in an oven, the same back-breaking work that the Israelites were told to do in that verse I quoted to Jonathan during the interview. But the Spiritans weren't serving Pharaoh. They were serving a higher power and took that work on themselves willingly. Same work, different master, different results. When we do hard things with a whole heart, we don't burn out. Instead, we're like the burning bush that Moshe encounters in the desert, of which the Torah tells us, Hasne enenu ukal. The bush was not consumed. We're so used to thinking of burning out because we use up our compassion or our mental energy or our ability to care about what happens. But trauma therapist Brian Miller, in his CE CERT program for preventing secondary trauma in the helping professions, reminds us that intense, hard work isn't what burns us out. It's feeling helpless and overwhelmed in that work. Faced with challenging work and given the tools to do it well, we thrive. We're not consumed. We feel like masters. We become like the Spiritans and the bricks they baked, strengthened by the fire. The trick is getting to that place of having the tools and the time to do our work well and safely. In many places, neither healthcare workers nor the people we care for can honestly say that about our work. As a healthcare leader, I'm constantly struggling against becoming my own version of Pharaoh, saying, just work harder, and instead looking for ways to provide the straw, make baking the bricks easier, and roll up my sleeves side by side with the people on my team. New technology, different schedules, and extra hands will never make the work easy, but it can change a person's frame of mind, giving us hope that, as the saying goes, we can do hard things.
Thanks for spending time with me today. If this conversation sparked something in you, subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and share it with a colleague who could use a reminder of why we do this work. For more thoughts, explore my blog at www.healerswholisten.com/blog or follow me on Instagram at healerswholisten. For deeper dives, check out the book version of Healing People, Not Patients, or my second book, From Illness to Exodus. Links to both are in the show notes. Our theme song, Room for the Soul, is available on Bandcamp. It's a reminder that together, we can find room for the soul in medicine. This podcast is not medical advice, nor is it legal or financial counsel. It's a space for reflection, rooted in stories, spirituality, and the art of healing. For your own care, always consult the professionals who know you best.